On my wedding night, red silk feels like blood. I married the ruthless Eunuch Alexander under a stolen identity. Years ago, I publicly humiliated him. Now he holds my life in his blood-stained hands. Surrounded by torture tools, I await my execution. But as he tilts my chin, the devil whispers, "Since you're unwilling, why not fight back?" I married a eunuch. Tonight is our wedding night. I sat on the bridal bed. Through the red veil, Alexander Gu's tall, lean silhouette drew closer and closer. My palms were slick with sweat. I didn't even know if I'd live through the night. Years ago, I'd slapped him more than once. Now he was the grand eunuch, second only to one, above 10,000. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the tray beside the bed. It was a dazzling display. Jade toys, leather whips, everything you could imagine. A pervert bred by the palace, harsher than any consort. I'd heard stories about eunuchs tormenting young maids. If Alexander Gu had that taste, then it wasn't a question of whether I'd survive tonight. It was whether I could at least die quickly. "Lottie," Alexander Gu said, "who would have thought that after all these years, the first time we'd be alone together again would be like this?" He lifted my veil himself. I looked up at him. I'd seen enough plots and betrayals in the palace, yet I still couldn't stop my fingers from trembling. After all, Alexander Gu had plenty of blood on his hands, directly or indirectly. "I'm surprised too," I said evenly, "that you'd lower yourself and accept Empress Catherine's marriage decree and marry me." In the palace, learning to speak without emotion was basic survival. He suddenly bent down and gripped my chin in his right hand, forcing me to look up at him. A crushing pressure rolled over me. The officials he disposed of at the Eastern Depot must have felt like this before they died. Our noses were almost touching. It was the first time we'd ever been this close. Terrifying as he was, I had to admit it. Alexander Gu was tall, with sharp brows and bright eyes. Unmistakably handsome. Years of court intrigue had honed him. He looked composed, yet there was ruthlessness underneath. The kind of man people would praise as elegant and peerless. If he weren't a eunuch. He was only 27 or 28, and he'd climbed to the rank of grand eunuch at that age. How many corpses he'd stepped over was beyond anything a palace maid like me could imagine. If one more body was added tonight, it would mean nothing to him. "Empress Catherine is my master," he said. "I'm only a servant. I wouldn't dare disobey." A wave of dizziness hit as he shoved me down onto the bed. My heart hammered wildly. In the bitter cold of 12th-month weather, cold sweat broke out again and again. I closed my eyes and folded my hands neatly over my abdomen. I felt his fingers slide slowly from the center of my forehead downward, all the way to my clasped hands, as if he were splitting me in two. My hands shook even harder. His fingertips stopped on my hands. "If you don't want it, why don't you fight back?" Alexander Gu's voice was clear, nothing like the shrill sound people outside the palace imagined. "The Lottie I know was never harmless." That's right. I was never harmless. To live in the palace and make it this far, no one's hands were truly clean. The masters didn't want to dirty their own hands. Servants became their claws. "Grand Eunuch, you're joking," I said, opening my eyes to look at him. A mocking smile curved his lips. "You're my master. I'm only a maid. I wouldn't dare disobey." Alexander Gu was no servant. If he wanted, everyone in the palace would kneel and call him father. Emperor Edmund had only days left, bedridden. Empress Catherine had no son. Alexander Gu had risen through Consort Victoria. Consort Victoria had a 7-year-old son. If that boy took the throne, Alexander Gu would truly cover the sky with one hand. The whole palace would live at his mercy. And I, unfortunately, was the head maid of Consort Amelia. Consort Victoria's rival. People called me Auntie out of respect. Consort Amelia also had a son, Prince Julian, 18. But Consort Amelia's background was poor, and she wasn't very sharp. She'd risen on luck and favor alone. Once Emperor Edmund fell, Prince Julian might be older, but he still wouldn't win. "Well said. Worthy of being Consort Amelia's #1, Alexander Gu said. He stood and walked to the head of the bed, rummaging through the tray. When he turned back, he was holding 2 candles. I sprang up at once. "Don't come any closer." No matter how composed I usually was, I couldn't hold it now. I yanked out my hairpin and pointed it at him. My long hair tumbled down in an instant. "Grand Eunuch, you? I was usually quick-tongued, but now I couldn't find the words. I wanted to plead some bond between colleagues, but he'd likely find it beneath him. I wanted to mention old ties, but our ties were nothing but serving different masters and trying to ruin each other. If I said it, he might only become more brutal. Alexander Gu watched me and kept smiling. What? Kill me, I said. I was already breaking. My hand shook so badly I could barely hold the pin. The inner palace was cruel. The eastern depot was terrifying. Alexander Gu was the sum of both. I only wanted to die. I flipped the hairpin around and offered it to him. Please, Grand Eunuch Alexander, have a little mercy. Give me a quick end. When I'm gone, I'll pray for you every day and remember your great kindness. As far as I know, you cherish your life, Alexander Gu said. His smile vanished. His face turned dark and frightening. Is marrying me more terrifying than death? Then he smiled again, as if answering himself. Of course. Marrying a eunuch is worse than dying. You're 23 this year, aren't you? If this hadn't happened, in 2 more years you could have left the palace and married. He tossed the hairpin aside, yanked me off the bed, and shoved the 2 red candles into my hands. A gift from Empress Catherine doesn't get to die so easily. Hold the candles. Kneel all night. He stripped off his official robes and lay down on the bed himself. When a eunuch took a wife, people only laughed. Even if he was the Grand Eunuch, it amounted to no more than a palanquin carrying me from the palace to the Grand Eunuch's residence. I wore a bridal gown beneath the red veil. He'd worn only his everyday official uniform, and the red wedding pom-pom on his chest had vanished long ago. Empress Catherine had given me to him to curry favor. She meant for him to torment me as he pleased. Even if I was a senior maid with a little standing in the palace, once I married and entered his residence, even if I died, no one would care. Once I understood that, I let out a long breath. I lit the red candles in my hands, snuffed out the other candles in the room, and knelt at the foot of the bed. The room was warmed with underfloor heating and covered with a thick rug. Kneeling for long still made my knees ache and go numb, but it was nothing compared to what I'd endured in the palace. Candle wax dripped onto my hands, burning enough to make my face twist. I didn't dare make a sound, afraid of disturbing the plague on the bed. Alexander Gu truly held a grudge. 8 years ago, I'd slapped his face, and I'd made him kneel like this for a whole night. Emperor Edmund had few children. Back then, Consort Amelia was the only one who'd borne a son, and her glory was unmatched. Consort Victoria had been just an ordinary consort. Alexander Gu was Consort Victoria's chief eunuch. I was Consort Amelia's writing maid, only slightly better off than a low-ranking maid, and only because my handwriting was good. Consort Amelia had risen from the laundry service. She'd never studied, and she only knew a few characters. But she was stunning, flirtatious, and seductive. She had Emperor Edmund wrapped around her finger, and she had Prince Julian as her biggest chip. In the palace, she got whatever she wanted. It was so long ago I'd forgotten what Alexander Gu did to offend Consort Amelia. She was offended daily, after all. Too much sugar, too little salt, anything could be a crime. I only remembered it was a sweltering summer night. Alexander Gu knelt in Consort Amelia's palace. Consort Amelia casually pointed at me and told me to take a wooden paddle and slap his face 30 times. The palace paddles were solid. The first strike landed with a crisp crack, and the skin reddened instantly, swelling at once. After 4 or 5 slaps, I couldn't bear to hit him again. Alexander Gu was only 20 then, with a pale, clean face. Once it swelled and reddened, it looked especially shocking. I knew exactly how important a pretty face was in the palace. 30 strikes would surely split the skin. In the stifling heat, it would fester and rot. He would be disfigured. With a ruined face, he wouldn't even be fit to serve as a chief eunuch, let alone keep his post in Consort Victoria's palace. The palace loved to trample the fallen. The end waiting for him would be miserable. Consort, I said, daring to speak, slapping his face isn't very interesting. Then I continued, Consort Victoria always prides herself on being noble. Why not make her chief eunuch kneel and hold a lamp for you all night? Even beating a dog depends on its master. Wouldn't that feel better? When I saw interest spark in Consort Amelia's eyes, I smiled and went on. There's an old poem. I fear the flowers will sleep when the night grows deep, so I burn tall candles to light the red beauty. Consort, you're breathtaking. Let's make it elegant tonight. Have him hold candles with both hands and kneel all night, so your peerless face can be properly illuminated. Consort Amelia was delighted. She hated being called uneducated. She liked to play at refinement, and she cared obsessively about her looks. She approved at once and even promoted me to be her personal maid. In a sense, I climbed over Alexander Gu to rise. Even if that wasn't my intention, it was the truth. I suggested the punishment, and Consort Amelia, that extraordinary specimen, made me supervise him all night. I wanted to send my warm regards to her ancestors. That night, Alexander Gu knelt while I stood beside him. In the dead hours when even ghosts would doze off, I said the only sentence I spoke to him all night. I'm going to sleep a little. You keep kneeling. Wake me before dawn, or we'll both be finished. I knew he wouldn't dare let me sleep through. If he accused me of slacking, I'd drag him down with me. After that, I leaned against an osmanthus tree and dozed. His only interaction with me was when he nudged my shoulder before dawn and woke me. I looked at the wax piled on his hands, the perfectly unwrinkled palace uniform, and his body damp with dew. My mouth twitched, and I sucked in a breath. He'd knelt the entire night without the slightest pretense. Even when I slept. Even with no one around. After that, we never had another friendly exchange. The inner palace was full of trouble. He followed Consort Victoria in swindling and scheming. I cleaned up messes for Consort Amelia. Now and then, we crossed hands. It really mattered whom you followed. With Consort Victoria behind him, Alexander Gu rose like a rocket. Now he controlled the Eastern Depot and the Embroidered Guard. As for me, after all these years, I was still only a senior maid. The fact that I was alive at all felt like heaven's mercy. Consort Amelia had never truly been favored. That was why Consort Victoria found an excuse and had Empress Catherine decree my marriage to Alexander Gu. It cut off Consort Amelia's right arm and soothed old hatred. My life was cheap. From the day I was born, anyone could step on me. But even the cheapest life had a reason it had to exist. As long as there was the slightest hope, I had to live. Alexander Gu was right. I cherished my life. After kneeling most of the night, it must have started snowing heavily outside. From time to time, I heard the faint crack of branches breaking. Alexander Gu hadn't moved in a long time. He was probably asleep. The idea of kneeling and holding candles really was good. Even with a rug, my knees ached sharply. My arms, held straight out with the candles, were sore and numb. My eyelids kept drooping. I'd brought this on myself. When I woke, bright red curtains filled my vision. I jolted upright in fright. I clutched the soft, thick quilt and pinched my own cheek. It hurt. Not a dream. I looked around. This was Alexander Gu's room, no question. Yesterday I married him. Last night I knelt at the foot of the bed holding candles. The rug still bore drops of hardened wax. But how I ended up on Alexander Gu's bed I couldn't remember at all. Even with 10 times the courage, I'd never do such a thing unless I'd been sleepwalking. But I didn't sleepwalk. I remembered something important and hurriedly checked my clothes, then lifted the quilt. Thank goodness. I was still wearing last night's red bridal gown. Nothing was missing. I shook my head. What was I panicking for? Alexander Gu was a eunuch. Then I looked at the small table by the bed. The tray of messy items was still there. Eunuchs were even more frightening. That was the truth. Hearing movement inside, 2 maids knocked and entered. They looked about 16 or 17. One was Grace, the other Sophie. Behind them came 4 younger girls, each carrying something. Grace and Sophie helped me wash up. They draped a red wool cloak trimmed with white fox fur over my shoulders and said with a smile, "Auntie, wear this for now. All your things are in Plum Court. We'll take you there, and you can bathe and change." The cloak was warm and faintly scented, smoked over incense. Grace and Sophie moved properly, smiled properly. The most typical kind of palace-trained servants. I followed Grace out into the courtyard and looked up at the plaque. It read, Bamboo Court. The handwriting looked familiar, somewhat like mine, only more vigorous. I'd heard the Grand Eunuch's residence used to belong to some high official. Later it passed into Alexander Gu's hands. It was spacious and grand, of course. After walking a while, I caught the scent of plum blossoms. "This plaque has the same handwriting as Bamboo Court," I said, looking up at the words Plum Court. "The gold looks newly applied." "Yes, Auntie," Grace replied respectfully. "The master wrote the calligraphy himself. The plaques were replaced a few days ago." This place used to be called Springlock Garden, but the old sign was worn. She invited me to enter first. Plum Court was smaller than Bamboo Court, but delicate. Red plum trees filled the garden. The snow had fallen hard overnight, thick and heavy, making the blossoms look even more vivid. The bluestone paths were swept clean. Not a patch of snow in sight. Inside, the rooms were neat and crisp. Everything looked new. 2 wooden chests sat in the main hall. What I'd brought from the palace. I didn't have much. One chest held clothes and odds and ends. The other held the small savings I'd accumulated over the years. It was easy enough to put away. Grace worked fast. Before long, she had arranged everything as I instructed. Meanwhile, Sophie served me a meal. Only then did I learn it was already noon. This was lunch. Grace told the younger maids to prepare hot water. "The master goes to court at dawn," she said. "He often doesn't return until dinner or even late at night." She opened the large wardrobe by the bed. "These are new clothes made in the last few days. Auntie, try them first. If they don't fit or you don't like them, tell me. The storeroom has all kinds of fabric. If you don't like any, we can call the embroidery shop to bring options for you to choose." "Thank you." I took a large box of chopped silver and handed it to Grace. "You've worked hard. Share this wedding money with everyone, for good luck." Grace kept that proper smile and bowed. "Auntie, you humble me. It's everyone's good fortune to serve you, and also our duty. The hot water is ready. We won't delay your bath. We'll wait outside. If you need anything, just call." She withdrew with light steps. Alexander Gu ran his household with iron discipline. In the palace, money greased everything. Here, the servants were impossible to bribe. I soaked in hot water and stared at that box of silver on the vanity. I couldn't even spend it. It was depressing. Choosing clothes made my head hurt, too. It was a wedding, but the only festive decorations I'd seen were a few red silk flowers tied to the stone lions at the entrance and the stone railings in the residence. On the way here, they were already gone. When I left Bamboo Court, I even saw servants carrying in blue bed curtains. They'd probably taken down the red ones as well. My fingers brushed over one outfit after another. I couldn't help thinking the Grand Eunuch was absurdly rich. These fabrics were tributes. Even the palace consorts had to scheme for a share. If your rank was too low, no amount of money would help. In Alexander Gu's hands, they became things you could throw away if they didn't fit. Green? Wearing green right after marriage seemed unlucky. Besides, Alexander Gu was a eunuch. Would he think I was mocking him? Red? He didn't seem happy about this marriage. He might hate it. Better not tempt fate. But if I didn't wear red on the second day, would he think I regretted marrying him? Life was hard. Marriage was hard. Marrying a eunuch was hardest of all. If choosing an outfit could make me this miserable, how was I supposed to live from here on? I touched my hairline. In the end, I chose a crabapple red jacket and skirt. Not too bright, unlikely to offend. Looking at myself in the mirror, I realized I hadn't worn such vivid colors in 7 or 8 years. Palace maids were forbidden from wearing bright hues so we wouldn't seduce our masters. We were limited to dull colors like brown and gray-blue. There was a small study in Plum Court, stocked with poetry, ballads, strange tales, and storybooks. I asked Grace for writing supplies, laid out paper, and practiced calligraphy. The winter sun warmed the afternoon. It fell onto the rice paper, gilding the ink strokes. My mind was calm in a way I'd never known. As a child, I'd suffered to learn to write. In the bitter cold, I could only pick up a branch and practice in the snow. Father and Madame Liu always said a woman's virtue was in having no talent, yet they hired the most famous teacher, musician, and seamstress for my older sister. Charlotte Liu. I wrote the name again and again. "Auntie, the master is almost at the gate." My brush trembled. The final stroke came out crooked. The calm vanished. In the 12th month, darkness fell quickly. When I reached the entrance, Alexander Gu was just stepping down from his carriage. Teddy knelt on the ground and offered his back as a step. Once Alexander Gu was down, Teddy sprang up, lifted a lantern, and led the way. Teddy was Alexander Gu's adopted son, about the same age as Grace and Sophie. He worked at the Imperial Household Department and usually served at Alexander Gu's side. In the palace, people had to respectfully call him Eunuch Day. Alexander Gu wore a black cloak. Even under warm yellow candlelight, he looked no less cold. At 20, his cheeks had still held a trace of youth. Now his face was leaner, his features honed into something sharper and harder. When he didn't smile, he looked murderous. When he did smile, he was probably about to kill someone. I had seen Alexander Gu kill with my own eyes. It was when he had just taken charge of the Directorate of Ceremonial, only about a year after Consort Amelia made him kneel. He'd risen young, and plenty of people refused to accept it. Older palace hands always had lackeys. They constantly tried to trip him up. Later, Alexander Gu caught one eunuch making a mistake and used him as a warning. By palace rules, executions usually meant beating or strangling. They weren't so bloody. But that time, Alexander Gu gathered a crowd of high-ranking palace servants at the entrance of the laundry bureau. He made everyone watch slowly, as if it were entertainment. After 30 blows, he stepped forward himself, drew a dagger, and slit the man's throat in one clean cut. Blood sprayed 10 feet. Unfortunately for me, I hadn't been invited. But thanks to Consort Amelia's obsessive nature, I happened to be there delivering instructions to the laundry bureau about using jasmine-scented powder. So I watched Alexander Gu kill someone from an excellent spot, up close. Hearing about it and seeing it were entirely different. I'd never known blood could spray that far. I'd never known Alexander Gu could be so calm while killing. His face was dotted with blood, and he lightly licked the dagger. He refused punishment and tried to assassinate me, he said. I had no choice but to do my duty. In the future, I hope there will be fewer no choices. No one dared breathe. Half my body was hidden behind drying sheets. Even so, when he turned his head, our eyes met. At that moment, I had only one thought. My legs are weak. I want to kneel. I could kneel and call him father. Anything. After that, every time I heard his name or saw him, it was my first instinct. It wasn't that I was useless. He was beautiful. By rights, many young maids should have liked him and wanted to become a paired couple with him. The little maids in Consort Amelia's palace used to envy me for slapping his face. At least I'd touched him, they said, which made it worth it. But on the night of that killing, they all came to hug me and gave me small gifts. It felt like they were sending me off in advance. The more I thought, the more afraid I became. I had to stop. If I kept thinking, my calves would turn to water again. Alexander Gu walked over. I bowed, then followed him into the residence. He took off his cloak and tossed it to Teddy, then sat down to eat. I was about to serve him when he said, "You're not a servant. You don't need to do that." I froze, suddenly awkward. Teddy was quick-witted. He hurried over, pulled out a seat for me, and said with a smile, "Auntie, sit and eat. These chores are for us. How could we trouble you to do it yourself?" Then he efficiently served the dishes. 5 servants hovered around the table, yet it still felt like no one existed. Dinner was eaten in an eerie, deathly silence. I didn't dare say much. I ate the food in front of me, nerves stretched tight, unable to taste a thing. Cough, cough, cough. Suddenly, I clutched my throat and coughed violently. Of course, the moment I least wanted trouble, Consort Amelia's cleverest maid, got a fishbone stuck in my throat. In the chaos, I heard Alexander Gu bark a couple of orders. Then someone clamped me tight. Next, Alexander Gu pinched my nose and poured a huge bowl of aged vinegar down my throat. I would never forget that scene. If it hadn't been so sour, I would have sworn he was poisoning me. The moment he released me, I pressed a hand to my chest and coughed hard, nearly retching. I'd used up every drop of vinegar I would ever eat in this lifetime. I started, but couldn't finish. I didn't dare curse him. I couldn't argue either. You can still shout that loud. You'll live, Alexander Gu said, taking a cloth from Sophie and wiping his hands. His smile held 3 parts laziness, 3 parts wild ease, and 4 parts mockery. They all say Auntie Lottie is clever and proper. From what I can tell, you only look good because Consort Amelia makes you look better. A general picked from a crowd of short men. After wiping his hands, Alexander Gu set the cloth on the table. I'm done. Eat slowly. Someone remove the fish. If tomorrow word gets out that Auntie died choking on fish, the Grand Eunuch's residence can't afford that embarrassment. From his tone, he was in an excellent mood. Was his mouth blessed by the gods, or steeped in poison? 8 years ago, why did I slap his face? I should have smashed that mouth of his instead. I was so furious I was ready to puff up like a pufferfish, and he expected me to keep eating? I returned to Plum Court and sat on the bed, sulking. My stomach and throat both tasted sour. Half an hour later, Grace came with a small tray. "Auntie, you ate too little tonight. Here are taro cakes and bird's nest with snow toad porridge. Have a little. Even if you can't eat, the fish bone scraped your throat. Drinking something will soothe it." Even with her training, I could tell she was holding back laughter. After all that vinegar, my mouth felt wretched. The porridge was a relief. I remembered something and asked Grace, "Is the Grand Eunuch free right now? I have something I want to discuss with him." "The master is in the study." "Then forget it." I let out a dry little laugh. "He's busy, I won't bother him." "Auntie, please wait. I'll go ask and come back with an answer." Grace left. Soon she returned and led me to see Alexander Gu. She stopped at the study door and didn't go in. I knocked. "Come in," Alexander Gu said. In the winter night, his voice sounded especially clear. I pushed the door open. He was alone inside. Candlelight stretched his shadow long across the room. Documents and memorials lay on the desk. I didn't dare glance at them. "You're standing so far away," Alexander Gu said, lifting his eyes. He seemed to guess what I was thinking and closed the papers. "Come closer. If you've got something to say, say it." I walked over. He sat. I stood. Somehow I felt steadier than I had last night. "My mother hasn't been well these past few years," I said. "Palace maids can only leave once a year. Tomorrow is the 3rd day after the wedding. I want to go home to see her. May I?" "No one in this residence forbids you to go out." Alexander Gu turned the brush between his fingers, the movement smooth and practiced. For a man, his fingers were long and delicate, more refined than even Consort Amelia's. "But you married a eunuch. If you go home to see your mother, aren't you afraid she'll be so angry she gets even sicker?" "She won't. My mother was born a servant, In my urgency, the words slipped out. I caught myself and coughed twice to cover it. "I mean, my mother is kind to servants, and your status is honored. She wouldn't think that way." Alexander Gu nodded, as if in agreement. "Thank you." I pinched the hem of my skirt and offered a stiff thanks, unsure what else to say or do. So hard. Maybe Alexander Gu was right. I wasn't clever. Consort Amelia was just stupid. Everything written on her face, but Alexander Gu was moody and stingy with words. Sorry. This was beyond me. I didn't know how to respond to him. "You're still standing here? He's planning to sleep with me tonight?" No. The image of that tray of tools flashed through my mind, loud as a swarm. I waved my hands and fled in panic. "Charlotte Liu, you're becoming more and more impressive." "Lottie?" I stopped and turned back. "I told you. You're not a servant in the Grand Eunuch's residence." Candlelight flickered. Shadows fell from his long lashes like a butterfly that might take flight at any moment. "You don't need to live on tiptoe here." Trembling at every step. "You look very beautiful in that dress." That feeling, my heart missing a beat. Could I have a heart attack this young? I tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. My mind was full of Alexander Gu. I'd been in the palace for so many years that fear of him had seeped into my bones. The day I witnessed that killing, I staggered back to Consort Amelia's quarters, shaking. That night, I ran a high fever. It lasted 3 days, packed with nightmares. I nearly died. After that, as long as I could avoid Alexander Gu, I did. I'd rather take a full lap around the palace than cross his path. If I couldn't avoid him and had to see him, I forced myself to look calm. I worried that if I seemed too afraid, he'd notice me. Then I'd only be inviting trouble. I wanted to keep my head down, but Consort Amelia's temperament didn't match her title at all. Amelia, my foot, she wanted chaos every day. Getting onto the boat was easy, getting off was not. Because of her, I'd already offended plenty of people. If I also lost her favor, I'd die with nowhere to be buried. Consort Amelia, no matter how bad things got, still had a son, Prince Julian. With a child, you have something to stand on. What else could I do? Keep going. 3 years, then another 3. I'd scattered beads. I'd slipped in poison. Whenever it involved Consort Victoria, I'd dodge the worst and stay on the edge. If I could bluff, I did. I took plenty of punishment for it. Sometimes I'd be walking around with a swollen face, single-handedly dragging down the palace's average looks. I'm not a good person. I bully the weak and fear the strong. I smile to your face and stab you behind your back. After all these years in the palace, I'd become completely twisted. Those petty, sarcastic people were nothing. As long as I wasn't a full-blown lunatic, that made my character rare and precious. I often envied the little Pekingees in Consort Amelia's arms. It didn't have to do anything. It could eat and sleep and still receive her unconditional affection. Until, for no reason at all, it charged at Emperor Edmund and got stewed. I used to bathe it and brush its fur. It had been a good dog. The night before I was married off, Consort Victoria bestowed a gold hairpin on me. The tip was blunt. She'd been thoughtful. I found a whetstone and worked all night, grinding it sharp to a point. At dawn, I meant to drive it into my throat and end it. But then I thought it would hurt. And I thought that if I died, my mother would have no one at all. So I shifted it aside and pinned it where it belonged, into my hair. I'm afraid of pain, and I'm afraid to die. I want to live well. So pulling out that hairpin and pointing it at Alexander Gu was a moment of pure madness. I was only terrified of a fate worse than death. I'd overthought myself into not sleeping at all. The next day I had panda eyes. Pretty diligent, Auntie Lottie. Up early to paint on a smoky eye. When I arrived at Bamboo Court, Alexander Gu had already washed up. He looked me over. But that style's out of date. The palace is into peach blossom makeup these days. First thing in the morning, and he was already mocking me. Peach blossom makeup? I'd rather make your face bloom with peach blossoms. I took his clothes and attended him as he dressed, keeping my voice as gentle as I could. Don't mind it. I'm allowed to go home and visit family. I was so happy last night I barely slept. That's why I look a bit off, and why I'm later than usual. I'll come earlier tomorrow. I was about the same height as Consort Amelia, so serving her was easy. Alexander Gu was more than half a head taller than me. Dressing him was awkward. Alexander Gu took the clothes and put them on himself. Then, all at once, he bent down close to me. Too close. We stared at each other. His warm breath brushed my skin. Third strike. I'll say it one last time. You're not a servant. You don't need to do these things, and you don't need to call yourself one. If you do it again, you'll be punished. His breath carried the clean taste of bamboo salt. It should have been refreshing, yet it made me lightheaded. Ever since I entered the Grand Eunuch's residence, I'd been either dizzy or racing heart nervous. If I died young someday, it would be Alexander Gu's fault. Come, breakfast. He smiled. I had to admit it again, his looks were unreal. A ruthless, antisocial power eunuch, with a face sculpted by the gods. Stare too long and your morals would run off with his features. No wonder Consort Victoria liked him. Guilty and ashamed, I lowered my head. When I did, Alexander Gu stopped teasing. He straightened and smoothed his clothes in the mirror. He seemed in a good mood. In the palace, I'd hardly ever seen him like that. Fine, let him be happy. The happier he was, the longer I lived. Morning sunlight filled the room. It didn't feel as bleak as last night. I drank my porridge in silence. Porridge was a good thing. It wouldn't choke you, and it wouldn't catch in your throat. Pack up and go over whenever you're ready. I still have things to handle at my place, so I won't go with you today. Alexander Gu ate elegantly but quickly. By now he was already wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. All right. I didn't want you coming anyway. He said nothing more and left. I stood and said, safe travels, then sat back down to eat. The moment he was gone, my appetite improved. The Grand Eunuch's residence really did have great food. Little steam baskets, small portions, lots of variety. There was a concubine from the southern lands. I'd once served Consort Amelia while she ate sweets with her, so I'd seen this kind of morning tea. I'd craved it ever since. After breakfast, Grace and Sophie came with me to the Liu residence. I'd only prepared one chest of silver, planning to give it to the household servants. I didn't expect those two maids to load 2 full carts of goods, saying Alexander Gu had ordered it. I hadn't thought it through. The Grand Eunuch's residence did need to keep up appearances. Alexander Gu didn't care about a little money. The Grand Eunuch's residence wasn't far from the palace. This area was worth gold by the inch, home to nothing but the powerful and rich. The Liu family wasn't that grand. They lived out in the capital outskirts. My father had once been a county magistrate. After I entered the palace and gradually won Consort Amelia's favor, he latched on to that thin connection. He spent a lot of money behind the scenes, currying favor with the officials around Prince Julian. Somehow, it worked. He clawed his way into the capital and became a director in the Ministry of Works. At least, he was a capital official now. Once you're in the capital, resources come easier. His daughter Claire Liu smoothly married into a noble family. Her husband placed second in the imperial exam 2 years ago, and now he worked at the Hanlin Academy as an editor. The Liu family, happy and whole. As I thought that, the carriage arrived at the Liu residence. I looked at the 2 characters on the plaque. Somehow it felt worse than the Grand Eunuch's residence. At the Grand Eunuch's residence, I felt fear. At the Liu residence, I felt disgust from the bottom of my heart. I didn't want to call it home. Today was a day off. My father wasn't like Alexander Gu, a high official always busy. He was in the residence. I thought only he and Madame Liu would be there. I didn't expect Claire Liu to be there too, with both children. I exchanged a few pleasantries like I did during our once-a-year meetings, then headed for the back courtyard to see my mother. Claire Liu and Madame Liu looked at me with open contempt. My father's gaze was more complicated. I knew exactly why. Those 2 simply mocked me for marrying a eunuch. As for my father, he mocked me while calculating what profit he could squeeze from it. The problem was, he couldn't read Alexander Gu's intentions toward me. I didn't want to waste words on them. These people had nothing to do with me. In this world, I had only one family member. My mother. Sisters come home to visit. Why isn't brother-in-law here with you? Claire Liu smiled as she spoke, patting the child in her arms. Not coming is good. Saves him from feeling sad when he sees children. No matter how much power he has, he's still a eunuch. A eunuch, how can he count as a man? What a pity. Sister probably won't ever get to be a mother. Claire Liu had 2 children after marriage. Her daughter was 2. Her son was still nursing. I sneered. I feel sorry too. Sister only had 2 in 3 years. Nowhere near as fertile as Nini. Nini? Claire Liu frowned. Who's that? The old sow I keep in the palace. She can drop 10 piglets in 1 litter. Claire Liu, watch your filthy mouth. Who are you calling a pig? I didn't hear you were dead, so I came specially today to see if you still had the nerve to come home. Trash like you, shaming the family, marrying a eunuch. You still dare show your face. If you had any shame, you'd smash your head into a wall and die. Little sister, have you gone mad? You even called the wrong name. Isn't Claire Liu you? You think I want to carry your name? My mother isn't that low. Claire Liu's contempt was written all over her face. But fine. Being called Claire Liu for all these years was disgusting, but at least I got something out of it. If I'd been the one to enter the palace back then, wouldn't I be the one marrying a eunuch now? Actually, if I'd gone into the palace, I would have ended up above everyone else. I wouldn't be as useless as you. If she'd gone into the palace back then, who knew whether she would have lived long enough to be married off to Alexander Gu? I rolled my eyes. I couldn't be bothered to spar with her anymore, so I went to find my mother. I was the younger sister, the concubine-born daughter Claire Liu. She was the older sister, the legitimate daughter Lottie. The reason we swapped identities was simple. Every 3 years the palace brought in a new batch of girls. If the emperor took a liking to you, you became a consort. If he didn't, and your family background was good, you left the palace. If your background wasn't good enough, you stayed and served as a female official, and you couldn't leave to marry until you turned 25. They called it female official. In truth, it was only a little better than a rough servant girl. Minister Liu was trash to me, but to his legitimate daughter, he was the perfect father. Madame Liu came from a good family and was formidable. Minister Liu had been a poor scholar and was terrified of his wife. Even though she couldn't bear a son, he didn't dare complain. My mother, though, had been a laundry maid at the Liu residence. I don't know whether washing clothes makes you beautiful, or whether beautiful women always end up washing clothes. On a dark, reckless night, in drunken lust, Minister Liu forced himself on my mother. Worse still, it happened just once, and that one time was enough. That's how I came into the world. I originally had a twin brother, but he died not long after birth. Died of illness? Believe it if you want. If I'd been a boy, I'd have died of illness too, or maybe I'd have choked while eating, or drowned on a sip of water. In any case, the old couple in the Liu family craved power, but Emperor Edmund was getting old. They couldn't bear to send their daughter into the palace. If she wasn't chosen, she'd live like a servant with no good days. If she was chosen, it would be widowhood in all but name, plus palace warfare. Neither was a good path, so they handed that path to me. I had to go. My mother's health was poor. Each dose of medicine cost half a tael of silver. A tiny broken house cost hundreds. Doctors and helpers were real practical burdens. I needed money. I needed medicine. I needed the Liu family to let her live. So at 12, I entered the palace under the identity of 14-year-old Lottie, and I stayed that way until now. My mother was only 16 when she gave birth to me. I was 21 this year. I looked at her lying on the bed. She was 37, yet she looked older and frailer than the 50-year-old noble ladies in the palace. I sat by the bed and held her hand. She slowly opened her eyes and smiled at me. Concubine mother, sister married a eunuch the other day. Today she came home to see you. Such joyful news. It'll bring luck and your body will surely get better. Lottie's voice floated in like a ghost. She blocked the doorway. Her mother stood beside her. Minister Liu peeked from behind them, hunched like a quail. This family was vile, so I slapped her across the face. After all, they say striking elders brings lightning, striking the younger ones doesn't. Lottie clutched her cheek at once and asked the standard question. How dare you hit me? I hit you because I hit you. Do I need to check the calendar first? Madame Liu couldn't just watch anymore. She stepped in. I'd like to see who dares lay a hand. My voice was edged with killing intent. I didn't need a mirror to know how terrifying my expression was. Palace life trained you well. No matter what, I'm now the Grand Eunuch's wife, married to Alexander Gu by imperial decree. If you touch me, you're slapping his face. You're slapping the Eastern Depot's face. Lottie, I've endured you for years. Apologize to my mother today, and I'll let it go. If you won't apologize, then we'll settle every old debt and every new one. Spit. Lottie ground her teeth. Your mother seduced my father. You're a bastard. The Liu family didn't kill you two all these years out of generosity. You marry a eunuch and still dare to run wild in the Liu family. Before she could finish her tantrum, the steward rushed in. Master, madam, outside there are so many embroidered guard. They've surrounded our residence. The moment Minister Liu heard that, he forgot our quarrel. He grabbed Madame Liu and Lottie and ran to the front hall. I took a deep breath and said to my mother, Mom, rest for a bit. I'll go take a look. I'll be back soon. My mother nodded. I turned away and I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears spilled from my eyes. Nanan, she called after me, her voice as thin as a mosquito. Don't fight, I'm fine. I didn't dare turn around. I scrubbed my face hard with my sleeve and said, okay. To hell with this rotten heaven. Bastards, never doing a single decent thing. Grace and Sophie waited at the door. The noise inside was loud. They must have heard it, but they didn't ask. I pressed 2 lumps of snow to my eyes so I wouldn't look so wrecked. In the main hall, Alexander Gu sat in the seat of honor. He wore a dark blue flying fish uniform with a black cloak. Everyone in the Liu family was kneeling. On each side of the hall stood 10 embroidered guard, tall and broad. Even in the inner palace, I rarely saw a display like this. When Alexander Gu saw me, he rose and walked over. Your father and mother are too polite. I told them it wasn't necessary, but they insisted on kneeling. I couldn't help letting out a laugh. Ruler and subject, father and child. Without rules, nothing holds its shape. You come first. Father won't mind, right? I looked at Minister Liu. Minister Liu must have been a quail in his last life. He nodded like his head was being hammered. Since we're here, and it's already time for lunch, Father, please. Alexander Gu lifted a hand. Minister Liu hurried to his feet and led the way. Alexander Gu sat down with the Liu couple in order. Lottie was about to sit when Alexander Gu spoke. This one. Just now you introduced her as the concubine-born younger sister? The words concubine-born made Lottie's face tighten. Your father works in the Ministry of Works. He's read a few books. Is this the Liu family's way of running a household? A concubine-born daughter sitting down before the legitimate eldest sister? Grand Eunuch, you're right, Minister Liu said. He shot Lottie frantic looks, then said to me, elder sister should sit first. I sat as told. Lottie was about to sit when Alexander Gu spoke again. Wait, order is only one issue. You're a concubine-born daughter and you're not even from the same mother as Lottie. Do you deserve to eat at the same table as me? Stop calling me concubine-born. She's the bastard. I'm Lottie. I'm legitimate. I was stunned. Call her stupid, and she won't get smart. But I hadn't expected stupid on this level. Minister Liu leapt up to cover her mouth. Lottie had been spoiled since childhood. Today she'd been slapped and scolded. Making it this far was already beyond her limit. Alexander Gu's smile vanished, his face went cold in an instant. Grace stepped out at the right moment to report. Master, just now I clearly heard the Liu family call the wife Claire Liu, and concubine-born daughter, and so on. Not only that, they were disrespectful to you. All the servants present heard it. When Alexander Gu's face darkened, it was terrifying. Minister Liu, why are you stopping her? Go on, keep talking. Quail Minister Liu dragged Lottie down to kneel. He trembled all over. I'll give you a chance, confess on your own. Otherwise, you can choose between the Eastern Depot and the Court of Judicial Review. Minister Liu couldn't take it. He spilled everything like pouring beans. Impersonating someone to enter the palace. You really dared to think of it. That's deceiving the emperor. It's a crime that wipes out 9 generations. Alexander Gu's tone stayed light. Minister Liu, you're wasted in the Ministry of Works. Come to my Eastern Depot. Your future would be limitless. Madame Liu was afraid, but she finally spoke. She really was the pillar of the Liu family. She smoothed her hair and bowed, still graceful. Grand Eunuch, this was our poor judgment at the time. Lottie was immature. We feared she wouldn't serve the palace nobles well, so we let Claire go in her place. But if you charge us with wiping out 9 generations, Claire is also part of the Liu family, and you too are. Madame Liu smiled with a blade hidden inside it, brimming with confidence. But before she could finish, Alexander Gu cut her off without mercy. First of all, Claire, pay attention. Claire, not Lottie. Alexander Gu emphasized it. Claire married me the day before yesterday. She is of the Gu family now, and has nothing to do with your Liu family. Second, you make a fair point. Strictly speaking, I'm also within those 9 generations, so if we were to convict, we'd naturally have to start from other angles. For example, embezzlement in the Ministry of Works while repairing roads and building dikes. Or a few minor errors in the Hamlin Academy's books. We officials must think broadly. We mustn't limit ourselves. At the words Hamlin Academy, Lottie's face went even whiter. Useful skill, saves on face powder. In other words, money. Third, if it comes to sentencing, I'll certainly be involved personally. Have you ever seen a capable man carry out collective punishment and include himself? Claire. I looked up at him. Didn't you say you wanted to bring your mother back? The Liu family's food doesn't look very good. Do you want to take your mother and go home early? I dreamed of getting my mother out of the Liu family. Just now I'd nearly blurted out that I wanted to take her away, but I forced myself to stop. What was I in the Grand Eunuch's residence? What right did I have to speak of bringing her in? The little I'd saved up was nowhere near enough to care for her. I looked at Alexander Gu. His smile still held its usual chill, but right then, I wasn't afraid at all. Surprise flashed through me. I froze for a beat, then nodded. Grace, when we leave, remember to haul the gifts back too. They're all medicinal herbs. No one else can use them. I'd misjudged Alexander Gu. He didn't need appearances at all. At last, my mother and I received the Liu family's apology and left that nightmare of a cage for good. Alexander Gu summoned the best imperial physician to treat my mother. He also found rare and precious medicines. When the weather was good, I had the servants carry her into the courtyard to sit in the sun. She was very happy. Ever since she was sold into the Liu residence, she'd never been outside. After she could no longer move well, it was already mercy that the Liu family let her live. Sunlight was out of the question. 10 days later, on a clear, bright afternoon, my mother passed. She left with a smile. She lay quietly in a reclining chair, sunlight covering her face, as if calling back the stunning beauty she'd had when she was young. I held her hand, wanting so badly to warm it. That night, when Alexander Gu returned, I knelt and knocked my head to the floor 3 times, thanking him for everything he'd done for her. He didn't treat it as bad luck. Instead, he let me set up a mourning hall in Plum Court and keep vigil for 3 days. He did too much. He could have ignored everything. He could even have killed me whenever he liked, humiliated me. At night, I dismissed the maids and knelt alone beside my mother's coffin. I didn't cry. I just knelt there, blank, my mind empty. I knew my mother had suffered too much. Her body was weak, Holding on until now hadn't been easy. I'd imagined her leaving me. But when she truly did, I finally understood what it meant to lose my only tie to this world. Footsteps sounded behind me. Alexander Gu lit 3 sticks of incense, bowed 3 times, then knelt on the cushion beside me. I turned and looked at him. Since you married me, your mother is half my family too. Kneeling is only right, and it's also making up for some regrets. Alexander Gu knelt perfectly straight. Candlelight rimmed his sharp profile with a warm halo, making him look gentler. My mother was the top courtesan in a brothel. When she got pregnant, she went to find my father. She was driven out. She died of illness when I was 4. Her body was thrown into the pauper's graveyard. I don't even know where her bones are. After that, the madam made me do flips in the brothel to entertain people. When I was 6, an old eunuch often came to drink and buy women. Keeping a boy didn't earn money, so the madam half sold, half gave me to him for 5 taels of silver. As he spoke, Alexander Gu's expression didn't change at all, as if he were talking about someone else. My chest tightened in waves. Do you know who your father is? Did you ever try to find him? Alexander Gu nodded. I know. A useless rich playboy in the capital. In their eyes, my mother was just a greedy brothel woman, available to anyone. They wouldn't acknowledge my blood. They might even kill me to protect their name. Then, was the old eunuch good to you? He took me as his godson and sent me into the palace. But he was twisted. If he was unhappy, even a little, he took it out on a child who couldn't fight back. More than once he beat me until I bled and blacked out. Minor injuries weren't worth mentioning. But sometimes he'd give me good food, hold me and cry, saying he was a eunuch with no one to rely on, that he was pitiful. Until I was 15. He got drunk and lashed me with a whip. I resisted and shoved him. He struck the corner of a table and died. He was the first person I ever killed. I don't know if he was good to me or not. I only know that I was never happy by his side. I fell silent. I'd thought my life was bitter enough. Alexander Gu had lived something even more tragic. While other boys drank, fought crickets, and rode out in bright clothes, Alexander Gu struggled to survive in a broken body. Born like a young lord, doomed to a hard fate. Claire? Alexander Gu said my name. I looked at him. Candlelight flickered in his eyes. 8 years ago, it was the only time anyone ever defended me. Thank you for saving me, and thank you for staying with me that night. You knew? I'm not stupid. Alexander Gu looked as if it were obvious. Then his gaze shifted away. After you fell asleep, I watched you all night by candlelight. I kept thinking, how could there be such a beautiful girl in this world? Being praised made me a little embarrassed. I tugged at my sleeve. Liar. Consort Victoria and Consort Amelia are very beautiful. There are so many other beauties in the palace. Not as beautiful as you. I kept twisting my sleeve, then remembered. If you knew I saved you, then why were you so harsh to me on our wedding night? And why scare me with all that? I wasn't trying to be harsh. You were the one who kept talking about killing someone and then killing yourself. I got angry. Alexander Gu looked at me. He realized what I meant. His face reddened slightly. I couldn't tell if it was embarrassment or urgency. Those things weren't placed by me. It was Teddy. I punished him the next day. With him saying it so bluntly, I didn't know what to say. Believe it or not, I never intended to bully you. Alexander Gu sighed. His tone was serious in a way I'd never heard before. Claire, your mother is gone. I understand your grief. Words are pale and useless. You've been steeped in palace life for years. You won't trust easily. But I still want you to know this. You're not left with nothing in this world. You still have me. As long as I live, I'll protect you. My nose stung. Tears fell before I could stop them. Then I crumpled to the floor and sobbed, as if every grievance I'd stored up for years burst out all at once. All these years, aside from my mother, no one had ever asked whether life was hard for me. And I could only lie to her and say I was fine. In all my life, no one had ever said they would protect me. I could endure anything, but one sentence from Alexander Gu broke me completely. Alexander Gu bought a good burial site in the capital outskirts for my mother. He also set up memorial tablets for my mother and younger brother at a temple in the capital. On the 7th day after her death, I went to burn incense. On the way back, I was kidnapped. I'd always known that attaching yourself to a powerful household came with risks. I just didn't expect kidnapping to come this fast. Besides, couldn't the kidnappers have asked around first? I wasn't necessarily that valuable to Alexander Gu. If they had the time for this, they might as well rob a bank. When the sack over my head was yanked off, the leader pulled down his face covering too. I knew him. An old acquaintance. Prince Julian, what exactly are you doing? Kidnap me if you want, but don't put your hands on me. Prince Julian didn't say a word. He just yanked me into a hug. Lottie, I finally get to see you. He let me go, looking thrilled. I heard the Empress gave you to Alexander Gu, that eunuch. I rushed here at once and only arrived in the capital yesterday. A tiger brought low gets bullied by dogs. Father is ill now, and my mother has lost a bit of favor. So they dare do this. It's outrageous. Prince Julian resembled Consort Amelia 7 or 8 parts. A man with a woman's beauty, stunning and dangerous. Having a beautiful mother mattered. Just look at his face and Alexander Gu's. The difference was that Prince Julian carried himself like someone who'd grown up adored. Not like Alexander Gu, whose eyes always held a faint shadow of coldness and stubbornness, impossible to hide. Prince Julian was so angry his eyes were red. Anyone would pity him. I patted his head, indulgent. Do you think Consort Amelia knows you came to kidnap me? Of course she doesn't. I didn't have time to tell her. And she wouldn't agree anyway. Prince Julian knocked my hand away impatiently. I'm not a child. Stop humoring me like one. I sighed. Prince Julian was impulsive. After all these years, he hadn't changed at all. Lottie, come with me. 2 years ago I said I would marry you, and you wouldn't listen. Now this disaster happened. Today is a rare chance. Even heaven is helping us. Come with me. I'll hide you in the southern lands. From then on, Alexander Gu will never find you. We can be together, for the long run. Prince Julian's eyes shone with excitement, brimming with confidence. 2 years ago, he really had said that. I'd brushed it off as childish nonsense, and warned him not to let Consort Amelia hear. Otherwise, I'd be thrown out of the palace at best, beaten to death at worst. I didn't doubt he could do it. Hiding someone wasn't difficult for a royal noble, especially now that he had his own fief and troops. Only, I bowed to Prince Julian. I won't go. I appreciate your kindness. Prince Julian's smile slowly froze. Why? He gripped my shoulders. Are you planning to stay trapped beside a eunuch dog forever? That's Alexander Gu. Alexander Gu, who kills without blinking. Do you know how many people he's killed in the palace and the court? Don't forget. You're mine. You've always been his enemy. I know. Then why? Because Alexander Gu has power and can cover the sky with one hand? Prince Julian gave a short laugh. Don't be stupid. Alexander Gu may be powerful now, but good days always end. No power lasts forever. Plenty of people want his head. Lottie, if you want wealth and comfort, I can give you something better. Outside the alley, embroidered guard began to pass by. Alexander Gu must have realized I'd been taken. Stop talking. Leave now. If you're caught, it'll give him the perfect excuse to deal with you. I urged Prince Julian to go. Fine, I'll go first. I'll give you 3 days to decide. 3 days from now, the Rouge shop at West Market. If you agree to leave, be there before dusk. Someone will meet you. With that, Prince Julian took his men and left. I returned to the Grand Eunuch's residence, my heart heavy with dread. Leave or stay? That was the question. Life went on, as ordinary as ever. Alexander Gu only rushed back from the palace the day I was kidnapped, just to check on me. After that, he was busy as usual. We only saw each other at breakfast and dinner. But Grace said that ever since I moved in, Alexander Gu had been coming back often, by his standards anyway. He had quarters in the palace. Before, he rarely returned to the Grand Eunuch's residence for meals. When work piled up, disappearing for 10 days or half a month was nothing out of the ordinary. These past few days, the weather had been good. The residents had a great many books stored away, so they took the chance to bring them out and air them in the sun. I flipped through them idly, and one poetry collection caught my eye. The cover was worn and tattered. The handwriting inside was familiar, unmistakably mine. I'd always had good penmanship. Back in the palace, I'd made extra money selling calligraphy. Plenty of servants couldn't read. I'd write letters home for them and replies back. 2 or 3 dozen copper coins per letter. It added up. I remembered this poetry collection. Some friend had brought me the job. The request was simple. choose poems and lyrics I thought were good, and copy them out. Easy work, pleasant even. So even though it had been years, I still remembered it. I didn't believe in that many coincidences. Empty pleasantries were one of the essential survival skills in the palace. They wouldn't stump me. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and the appointed day arrived. Today, Alexander Gu came home at noon for the first time I'd ever seen. It was the first time in my memory that we ate lunch together. "Alexander," I tested the waters. "After a nap, I want to go out for a walk and buy a few things. Is that all right?" He'd said I could leave the residence. But I didn't dare act like the mistress of the house. Not when I'd just moved in and already caused trouble with that kidnapping. I didn't know if I was being overly sensitive, but I felt his hand pause as he ladled soup. He nodded and set the bowl in front of me. "Claire?" "Huh?" I took the bowl and looked at him. Every time he said my name, it sounded especially warm, especially beautiful. "Wear more layers. It's cold outside. The temperature's dropped these past few days." "Okay." I smiled, but something in my chest suddenly tightened, aching. Alexander Gu said nothing more. He offered a routine, eat slowly, then left the table and went to Bamboo Court. Wasn't that just who he was? Aside from the night he kept vigil, when, maybe to comfort me, maybe because he missed his own mother, he'd briefly looked back on the wasted years of his early life, he barely spoke at all. I stared at the table full of fragrant, beautiful food and lost my appetite. When I went out that afternoon, I brought only Grace and Sophie. The capital at dusk was breathtaking. In deep winter, thick snow blanketed the red bricks and green tiles. The crimson afterglow gilded the entire city. The Rouge shop was right by the bridge, just ahead. As long as I walked in, I could cut myself off from the past. As long as I walked in, I wouldn't have to be the palace maid Lottie anymore. I wouldn't have to be the eunuch's wife everyone laughed at. When I returned to Plum Court, it was brightly lit, the glow reflecting off the snow and red plum blossoms. A servant said the Lord Eunuch was inside, and no one was allowed to enter and disturb him. "Get out." I pushed the door open. A wine cup smashed against my leg. A fine, luminous cup shattered on the floor. Since moving in, I'd never seen Alexander Gu lose his temper. I bent down, rubbed my leg, and walked in. Today, he wore silver robes. He looked even gentler than usual. He'd been turned slightly away from the door. Hearing movement, he turned his head. I didn't know how much he'd had to drink. His face was lightly flushed with a buzz, but his eyes were clear. The moment he saw me, his gaze burned. "It's you." He stared, as if making sure. "Why did you come back?" "Alexander, you must be joking. If I don't come back to Plum Court, where else would I go?" I sat beside him. "You already knew the one who abducted me last time was Prince Julian. You also knew he wanted to take me away. Otherwise, right after an incident like that, you wouldn't have let me go out with only 2 maids. The Eastern Depot is an intelligence organization. It would take you less than half a day to uncover the Liu family's affairs, let alone Prince Julian making such a commotion. Am I right? I gave you the chance to leave. Why didn't you go?" Alexander Gu didn't answer my question. He asked his own. "Before I answer, I'm going to ask you a few things. You have to answer properly. No lying." I took the wine from his hand and set it aside. "Fine." He nodded, agreeing readily. "A few years ago, you had someone ask me to copy a poetry collection. Was that you?" His eyes flickered. He hesitated before answering. "Yes. And when we got married, Grace and Teddy decorated the Grand Eunuch's residence for a wedding. You ordered them to take it all down. You also told them not to call me madam, only auntie." I couldn't help laughing. "Because you'd heard that after the marriage was granted, I hid in my room and refused to see anyone. You were afraid you'd make me unhappy. Was that it? Grace talks too much these days. She needs to be punished." A familiar killing aura rose on his face. But this time I wasn't afraid at all. I climbed into his lap, but I lost my balance and nearly fell. Alexander Gu reacted fast and wrapped an arm around my waist. I hooked my right arm around his neck, his eyes filled with shock. I smiled. "Alexander, answer me. Just tell me if it's true." What does mean?" I stared at him. "It's true. Are you satisfied now?" He looked annoyed. I was. I pulled a small box from my pouch and handed it to him. "A gift I bought for you this afternoon." He opened it. Inside was a pair of white jade belt clasps. I know you don't lack rare treasures, but I bought these with my own money. Consider it thanks for looking after me and my mother." "Only thanks?" The jade clasps lay quietly in his long fingers. His voice was low, close to my ear. "Not only thanks." All at once, I got tongue-tied. My cheeks grew hot. I couldn't tell whether they'd turned red. Our eyes met. Each of us held only the other's reflection. I didn't know who leaned in first. By the time I realized it, our lips were already tangled together. Alexander Gu held me tight, one hand around my waist, the other cupping the back of my head. There was still a bitter trace of wine on his breath. He was the one who drank, but I was the one who felt drunk. He carried me to the bed and tugged open my collar. His kisses drifted down to my neck. His breath grew hotter and hotter. I reached up to undo his collar clasp. Suddenly, like a startled cat, he sprang up and sat straight. I froze. "Claire, I'm a eunuch. If you want to regret it, you still can." He drew in a deep breath. Loneliness shadowed his expression. "When Empress Catherine granted you to me, I had selfish motives. If I didn't want it, no one could have forced me. But at the time I thought, if I lost that chance, I might never have a reason to get close to you again in this life. What good are power and influence? You and I stand on different sides. The stronger I am, the more you fear me. I kept telling myself that marrying you was saving you from the mud. On our wedding night, you were terrified. I couldn't keep deceiving myself. Again and again, I asked myself if I'd been wrong. Then I'd tell myself I wasn't, that I could let you go at any time. Just like this time. Claire, if you want to go, it's not too late." I didn't speak. I just looked at him. He met my gaze for a second, then quickly away. "I'm afraid I'll be less and less able to let go." Hearing him say all that made me feel half sweet, half sad. "But, Alexander Gu, do you have no sense of timing? No one wants to hear declarations right now. You barely talk most days, and at the critical moment you can't stop." I pressed something into his hand, then held his face in both palms. He lowered his eyes to look, lips parting as he sucked in a breath. Then he looked up at me again. I looked at him seriously, forcing myself to swallow my shyness. Smiling, I said, "Since I came back, I won't regret it." I pecked his lips. "Claire Liu never regrets anything, husband." In Alexander Gu's eyes, a tiny firework rose and burst. He pressed me down onto the bed again, said nothing, and kissed me hard. "Hey, wait." I put a finger to his lips. "What now?" Alexander Gu was the impatient one, even though he'd been hesitant just a moment ago. "It's not a big deal. It's just something I've kept bottled up for years, and I can't help asking." Curiosity got the better of me. "What is it?" He looked like he wanted me to ask quickly and not delay the main event. Did Consort Victoria have something going on with you? Was Emperor Edmund obsessed with your looks? The palace is dangerous and full of schemes. How did you rise so fast? Was it those unspoken rules? Alexander Gu's face darkened, and for the rest of the night, I paid the price for courting death. Even after being tormented all night, it still wasn't enough. I had to kiss and coax him until dawn, before I finally sent the ancestor off. Emperor Edmund didn't make it through the winter. On a snowy night, he died. Alexander Gu stationed heavy troops to guard the Grand Eunuch's residence. I had nowhere to go. I knew he was doing something extremely dangerous. I was so anxious I couldn't even practice calligraphy. I spent my days counting them. Alexander Gu had been gone for 9 days. On the 3rd day after Emperor Edmund's death, he returned. When he left, he wore a dark blue flying fish uniform. When I saw him again, it had been replaced by a crimson python robe, with a layer of white hemp over it. After the emperor's death, Alexander Gu helped a 7-year-old child onto that throne coveted by all under heaven. The reign title was Zhengde. Empress Catherine was elevated to Empress Dowager Catherine, respected in name, powerless in fact. Consort Victoria became Empress Dowager Victoria, triumphant at last. At night, I curled up in Alexander Gu's arms. He trained in martial arts, so his chest was solid, but several vicious scars cut across it, stark against his pale skin. He'd said they were from an assassination attempt many years ago. My fingers traced those scars without thinking. "It tickles," he chuckled, took my hand, and kissed my fingertips gently. I watched him kiss my hand. His brows and eyes were so tender. Time blurred, carrying me back years. It had also been a night of heavy snow. Consort Amelia had miscarried. She could have had a child. In the palace, children were never safe. For Prince Julian to have survived was, for her, luck beyond measure. The palace forbade memorial rites, saying they were inauspicious. So at midnight, in the snow, Consort Amelia made me carry a soul-summoning banner and walk one full circuit around the palace to deliver her child. I was 16 or 17 then. Afraid of the cold, afraid of ghosts, afraid of the dark. But I couldn't let anyone find out. I didn't even dare light a lamp. Alone, gripping the banner, I trembled along the palace wall. Forget saving a ghost, I felt like I might be escorted to the afterlife myself at any moment. When I passed Plum Garden, lights suddenly appeared ahead. Terrified, I hurriedly stuffed the banner into my clothes. The person came toward me holding a lantern, stopped in front of me, and it was Alexander Gu. "Auntie Lottie, it's past curfew, what are you doing here?" The same face, the same light. But back then, to me, he looked like a corpse that had leapt out of nowhere. I stood properly, smiling without warmth. The first snow of the year fell this evening. Red plum blossoms against snow are especially beautiful at night. By tomorrow, the palace servants will trample it into a mess, and it won't look as good. You like plum blossoms? Yes, plum blossoms are proud and pure. Unlike people who fawn on the powerful and bully the weak, without a shred of integrity. I admit I was furious and lashing out. If Alexander Gu hadn't harmed Consort Amelia's child, I wouldn't have ended up wandering the palace at night like a ghost myself. He didn't respond. The air grew heavy. I was still afraid of him, so I tried to smooth it over. "I've had too many worries lately, I'm just venting. Don't take it to heart, Alexander." "I won't." He handed me the lantern. "Since you have such refined taste, I won't disturb you. Take this lantern to admire the plums." With that, he left. After he went, I let out a long breath. It really was true. Enemies met at the worst times. At least he hadn't caught me. After that scare, I had no mood to continue summoning souls. I carried the lantern back to Consort Amelia's palace. For a long time after, I dreamed of a child crying. I didn't know if that child had failed to reach paradise. "Claire, you're spacing out." Alexander Gu held my hand, displeased. In my bed, but thinking about another man? I came back to myself and laughed. "Unbelievable, your authority just keeps growing." When he tossed my hand aside, I quickly wrapped my arms around him. I wasn't thinking about anyone else. I just remembered the palace. "Do you remember? One night you met me in Plum Garden and I said I was admiring plums." Alexander Gu clearly enjoyed that. "Of course, you idiot. Consort Amelia told you to summon souls and you went? If my people hadn't run into it and reported to me, someone else would have killed you that night. So you went looking for me on purpose?" "Yes, and afterward, I followed you the whole way, until you got back." He looked at me like I was an idiot. A bad feeling crept over me. "Don't tell me. The things I did. 9 times out of 10, I cleaned up after you." Alexander Gu smiled, patted my head indulgently, like I'd once patted a little lapdog the same way. My dignity shattered, and at the same time, warmth rose in my heart. So for all those years, he'd been protecting me in silence. It was complicated. "Why think so much?" Alexander Gu twirled a strand of my hair around his fingers. "From now on, you don't have to do anything. With me here, no one can make you do what you don't want." Yes, Alexander Gu was now the regent minister. He truly held power over the entire court, and yet a faint unease lingered in my chest, refusing to fade.